Let's get into it. Coach Colin here gave you that zinger. Listen to me right now. Let's just get right into it. It's a late night, for me at least, Egypt episode. We're going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, connecting some of the dots because this guest was talking about a massive labyrinth underneath Egypt. Joe Rogan and him are going to talk about it. We're going to jump to Danny Jones. We're going to jump to Christopher Dunn. We're going to jump to AJ from the Y-Files. We're doing a whole bunch right now. Get your tinfoil Speedos on. Here's the intro.
Independent researcher Dr. Carmen Bolter and Austrian investigator Klaus Dona arranged for the private company Geoscan to image Hawara using a proprietary satellite-based system. Their scans revealed multiple stacked levels of chambers beneath the pyramid and on both sides of the canal, some possibly linked by corridors. Monumental halls up to 80 meters long appeared at depths of 40, 60, 80, and 100 meters, separated by 20 to 50 meters spacing, uncannily close to Pliny's 90 steps. Around the same time, UK-based Merlin Burrows used a different satellite plus seismic technique derived from military submarine tracking. Their results matched Geoscan's: 4 distinct underground levels, colossal halls, and a central atrium-like space. According to co-founder Tim Akers, all levels converged on a vast open chamber housing a mysterious 40-meter-long metallic object, Tic Tac-shaped, freestanding, and unlike any known archaeological material. Independent researcher Dr. Carmen
Tic Tac-shaped. There you have it, guys. Tic Tac-shaped. Do you understand what that means? That is something we've heard a lot about. Tic Tac-shaped, metallic. Are we talking about a spaceship inside of this labyrinth? I don't know. That's something that we'll touch on a little bit. But again, we're going through a whole bunch of different people, but we got to jump in to this Joe Rogan stuff right now. We got... Guy looks so much like Shane Gillis. You got Shane Gillis right now. Shane Gillis, if he just decided, you know what? Let me go into ancient Egypt research instead of comedy. Let's jump right in, and then we'll do the rest of the crazy stuff.
Man, what's that in feet? Like 200 feet, 150 to 180 feet down, something like that.
So for anybody who's interested, what is the name of that video that you put out?
I think it's the ancient structure, like it's said to be greater than the pyramids. I try to tease it a little bit,
Yes.
but it's on my channel. I mean,
Well, it was a good tease. You got me.
Thank you.
I dove right in, and I remember I was in the gym while I was watching it, and I literally stopped working out. I was like, okay, I got to pause this. This is not something that I can consume while I'm working out. I need to like really pay attention to this because it's so wild.
Yeah, and I honestly, I'm grateful for how like that video took off. Like for me, it took off way bigger than ones that I've done in the past. I talked about the labyrinth in the past, and it's a much longer video. And I was really glad to get the chance to dive into these details because I've been wanting to revisit the labyrinth for a long time. However, there's just been recently a bunch of new data that came up about things that happened a decade or two ago, or inside the last decade, that really changed that picture. And it was things like the Merlin Burrows scans that correlated other scans and also reported on, there seems to be a metallic object down there. And this isn't sort of crazy emerging science. This is a legitimate company that is using technology that's been well established in defense and in the UK defense. It came out of the UK military as a technology that's been more or less proven. So, and the guy that Tim Akers, rest in peace, unfortunately he's since passed, but he, what he said about this object, like he is a credible guy to say this. He doesn't draw conclusions about what it might be, but it's not wood, it's not stone, it's metal. It's not unlike other metal that he's seen, although they couldn't classify what exact type of metal it is. But he said, there is in this central atrium, because the labyrinth has multiple levels, and it's almost like imagine yourself standing in a shopping mall, and you have that central atrium where you can see all these levels, and it's like this big central chamber that connects to these multiple levels. It's open. It's at least 40 meters long. It's really tall, and in the center of it is it's more than 40 because it contains this single sort of 40 meter long object that's sitting in there.
So how did you find out about the labyrinth? Like this is something that has been talked about for a long time.
Thousands of years.
Yeah, but no one, it's not in any like traditional archaeology books. It's not.
It is.
Is it?
Yeah. No, it is. So the labyrinth is kind of this is the other part that drew me to it.
Guys, this is a serious message. As you can see, I'm not even in uniform. I'm not wearing the signature hat. So, very serious message. 59% of you are not subscribed. Please, guys, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 500,000 subscribers. The road is long, but I know that we can do it. Please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the notifications. Please hit the like. If you want to keep seeing this content, if you want to help me move from being the Joe Rogan clip guy onto better, greener pastures, you gotta hit the like, you gotta hit the subscribe. It helps me tremendously. That is all I ask. Let's get back to the episode.
Is that it isn't something that's coming out of left field, right? It's not like this, oh, no one ever heard of this before. It's literally a structure that was written about extensively over hundreds of years in antiquity by authors like Herodotus, Diodorus Siculus, Pliny the Elder, Strabo, Polonius Mela. Like there's all of these writers of antiquity, and you're talking about time frames from like 500 BC up to the 1st century AD, had visited it, and they'd written about it and talked about it, and they gave it this legend. Guys like Herodotus said that it surpasses the pyramids in grandeur, and then you have, so this is from Herodotus' Histories in the 5th century BC, and he says, "For this I saw myself, and I found it greater than words can say. For if one should put together and reckon up all the buildings and all of the great works produced by the Hellenes, the Greeks, they would prove to be inferior in labour and expense to this labyrinth." So he's saying that all of the temples of the Greeks, of ancient Greece, you've been there, you've seen the Acropolis, and just if you added them all up, the labour to produce them would be inferior in what it would take to just make this one thing in Egypt, the labyrinth.
That is underground.
That's underground, right.
How do conventional archaeologists approach this? Do they discuss this at all?
Yeah, so
They for sure just try to push it under wraps. I just have to say, it's amazing. We have so many things like this where there is a historian or somebody who's talked about something hundreds or 1,000 years ago, and we just go, oh, that's myth. That's legend. That's not real. And that's exactly what's happening with this Labyrinth thing. He's going to go into it more. But I actually found the video that he was talking about, and he has more than just 1 or 2 accounts of people from hundreds of years ago talking about this labyrinth. There's many, and I'm going to make sure you see all of them. But it's just wild. You know, how many things do we think are myth that are actually real? You know? I think there's a bunch. I really do. Giants, this labyrinth, Atlantis. I think there's so many.
They do. It's been discussed. What happened was, so you had we always kind of knew where it was. So you have the classical authors of antiquity, which coincides with what you might call the Ptolemaic period of ancient Egypt. It's a transition from dynastic Egypt into becoming essentially a Roman province, like an imperial province of Rome. And that runs you up to about 400 or 500 AD, and then sort of civilization we have the Dark Ages, sort of have Roman Empire collapses, and it's not until again you get to the Renaissance and you have artists and other authors are looking at these historical accounts and they're talking about it, they're drawing it. Some of the depictions you see from the Labyrinth are in that, and then again not until the emergence of what I would call modern archaeology in the 18th century. So guys like Carl Lepsius in the 1700s started to look at these accounts and go and survey the place where they said it was. So, Herodotus and these authors, I selected the quotes here to just, there's a lot more that they say about it. But one of the things they talk about is they kind of give descriptions of where it is. They say it's near what was called Lake Moeris. And it's near a city that was the temple of the crocodiles, Crocodilopolis, or ancient Arsinoe is the other name for it. And we know where that is. And Lake Moeris sort of somewhat still exists. It's much smaller now, but it's in this region called the Fayum of Egypt. So if you ever look at Egypt on a map, you can imagine it's desert, and you have from north to south, you have this green line of the Nile, traces it down. But on the left side, you look at, there's this leaf-shaped depression that's all green. It's called the Fayum. It's a depression which used to flood with the Nile. Today, they use it for agriculture. And it's right at that neck of the Fayum where it connects up to the Nile Valley. And he also described it, they also described the pyramid that's at the site, because there is the pyramid to Amenemhat III on that site. So they give us all these descriptors, and everyone kind of agreed, so it's at this place called Hawara, where I've been to several times. There's still a pyramid there, and there's these great fields of sand and like little open-air libraries with chunks of stone. And what happened was, so Carl Lepsius went there, and he said, well, I've discovered the ruins of like a Roman town that's built on the surface. There's nothing crazy about it. Flinders Petrie was the guy who kind of got the closest. Now, Petrie went there in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and he was excavating. He dug down 7 or 8 meters. He got down and he found this massive stone slab of beton or plaster that was huge, like 1,000 feet long. Like it was he sort of traced the edges of it. And he's like, I'm standing on the foundation of the labyrinth. So what he said is like, it's all gone. Like it's basically, Petrie said, it's been quarried. This place has been a source of stone for literally millennia. So it's gone. So pretty much everyone since then in archaeology, Egyptology is like, and if you look on Wikipedia, they'll tell you, oh, it's gone. It was destroyed, it was quarried away. Petrie says, you know, I'm standing on the foundation of it, the bottom layer, and that's it. There's nothing here. And so that's always been kind of the position of orthodox Egyptology. Look in the textbooks, that's where it is. But that's all changed because there's been a whole bunch of different now scientific expeditions there. This is where it gets into some intrigue because the Matahar expedition, the Cairo University expedition, I mean, these happened. The results have come out since, but they were covered up at the time. They were suppressed. So the first guy to
What year was this?
2008 was the Matahar expedition.
They were covered up.
Yes. Yeah. So what?
Is this our boy Zawi?
Yeah, Zahi, it is.
Zahi. Sorry.
It was. And look,
Zawi.
and again, not my words. This is the words of Louis de Cordier, he's a Belgian artist and entrepreneur who funded and drove the Matahar expedition. He did it in conjunction with the Supreme Council of Antiquities, which at the time was helmed by Zahi Hawass. Also with the NRIG, which is the National Research Institute for like basically subsurface studies. So that's those guys dragging that box around. So they used a whole bunch of different techniques to look at these areas around that pyramid at the site of Hawara, things like ground penetrating radar, geomagnetism, very low frequency, like seismic tomography, electrical resistivity tomography. There's a bunch of different techniques that are well established. Known science. This isn't like the Kafre scan stuff, which like you can debate the merits of the technology. This is established technology, and they found the labyrinth. So, and what he found is that yes. So what Lepsius said about the ruins of a Roman or Greek or Persian town with mud bricks and stuff. Yep, that's there in the first few meters. You go down, then you hit the water table. So that's the other issue on this site is the water table. So the water's at like 5 meters below the surface, and under that is the slab that Petrie found. So like 6-7 meters is at that huge slab that Petrie found that he thought was the foundation. And then below that, Petrie didn't dig deep enough. Below that, we can find essentially a labyrinthian structure of granite and very, very dense rocks and walls and like a maze-like structure that has walls that are meters thick. There's another great slide in there that's the green and it's the actual VLF, right? That's it there. So yeah, so this is at 8 meters with VLF sounding. So you can see like this labyrinthian structure of these walls and all of these lines and walls. So these are like granite. And the scale of this, it's 100 meters vertically by 150 meters.
100 meters tall.
Well, no, so
vertically?
No. So the y-axis, I guess, of this. So we're looking down in the ground here, but you got to look at the scale. Like across the top, that's 150 meters, right? So, I mean, what 450 feet? So these are big walls.
So
it's big chambers and big walls.
For people at home, it's like a football field.
Yeah, it's a football field. Well, it's more. I mean,
100 meters.
I mean, in Australia, it's my 100 meters is the football field. I think. I don't know how big.
Yeah,
pretty close
it's 100
here.
yards. What is the difference between 100 yards and 100 meters?
It's 100 yards is a little less. So 150 meters, and this is only a section of the labyrinth. They scanned 2 sections. The labyrinth itself is said to be much, much larger than this. So they found
much larger than that.
Oh, that's huge. Yeah, no,
So what is the overall structure like?
It's like 1,000 feet at least.
Wow.
Like 3, 4, 5 times that size. I mean, you have to go back to we have some better indication with the more modern space-based scans now, but when they did the geophysical, like the ground penetrating radar scan, so they scanned 2 areas. That was the bigger one, like in front of the pyramid. Then they did another one on the other side of the canal that runs through the site today, and they found it on both sides. So that's the difference between like what we say about the lab, like what the textbooks will tell you about the labyrinth, it not being there and it being destroyed, to no, we've actually, now there's been the Matahar expedition, confirmed it was there. And so what happened, this was interesting, and I have, I think, reasoning for why this happened, but it was covered up. And these are the words, like Louis de Cordier, he eventually got sick of waiting, because what happens in Egypt, anything you do, whether it's you're an academic institution or you're an individual or a group that's funding some sort of expedition, you work with the Council of Antiquities today, it's the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. But they essentially, it takes years to get access. And then once you do, though, they control release of information. So that's always part of the deal, right? It's that Egypt gets to do the announcing, and if and when they choose.
And they have dismissed things in the past that they then accepted later.
Yeah.
These guys, these Egyptologists are 100% just hiding human history. just hiding it. It's so baffling to me when I first realized that, even before Rogan interviewed Zawi. I mean, when you first hear about Graham Hancock and you go into his work, you realize that they're just and here's the thing, what is it that they're hiding? I always think about that. it's like, are they trying to hide that the Bible's real? Are they trying to hide the fact that they're the ones that just walked into ancient Egypt and they didn't actually build the structures? Is that kind of pride thing? Like, what is it that they're hiding? But I also think that what they're hiding coincides with whatever the Vatican is hiding. Because Vatican's hiding something. I don't care what anybody says. They got a vault. They have their own labyrinth where they keep all of their stuff. Their archive is exactly like a labyrinth. It stretches. It doesn't. The whole thing is, I think they said 52 miles or 51 miles. And it's 6 floors. So like the 6 floors back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. If you spanned it out into a straight line, it's like 52 miles. So they have their own labyrinth. And I think it coincides with what they're hiding. And I think America has some stuff that they're hiding, whether it be pyramids, whether it be ancient civilizations. I think Canada probably has something that they're hiding. They probably don't even know. They probably have no idea because it's probably frozen out in Nunavut or Yellowknife or something like that. Yeah, I just think there's a whole bunch that they're hiding from people. Because, if people knew if you really knew where you came from, if you really understood the power of a human being, of your soul, your connection to the divine, if you really understood that, you wouldn't put up with the way things are today. You just wouldn't put up with it. I really do feel that. Now, I wanted to show you guys this because this is just the clip again. This is like some stuff you already heard, so I won't bother playing that. But the imaging beside it is what people are speculating that this thing looked like, right? This is what they think was going on. It basically sounds like a city. I mean, they're calling it a labyrinth. Oh, what's going on? You took it away? Goofs. Okay, it's only a few seconds.
The labyrinth.
But this is what they're thinking it looked like. This is what they think. Wouldn't that be something? I wouldn't doubt it at all, man. You know something? I wasn't even going to show you guys this, but I think it makes perfect sense that Egypt could have something like this. India temple in mountain. I think it's in India. Yep, there it is. There it is. Check it out. So this crazy temple that's just etched into a mountain. Like, look at that. Look at that. If these guys could have this, of course something like that could be in Egypt. I mean, this is just as much of a marvel. It's into stone. This thing is just one piece of stone, what you're seeing. Can I get a close-up on this? Look at this stuff. This is just one piece. You know how crazy that is? Let me see. Oh, yeah, there we go. Look how nuts that is. It's the same type of thing, same vibe. And it's funny how when we go back far enough, all societies somehow were connected in how they built things, the cave paintings, the depiction of things. They all had the same idea. The knowledge of the stars. For some reason, they all knew, and they were so far from each other. I don't know. And I think Indian people walked into this as well. I don't think they built this. That's what I think, honestly. There's a few jokes I could make up there, but I'm not going to. Now, let's jump into Christopher Dunn, because here's the thing. When you hear about this labyrinth, you have to go to Christopher Dunn. The reason is, if you don't know who Christopher Dunn is, Christopher Dunn was the first person to speculate, to research, not even just speculation. He researched this a lot. He's done a lot of work on this. He wrote a book, realized that he was wrong in some parts, and then wrote another book, confessed that he was wrong, which is so not what you do in archaeology, especially in Egypt. Admitted he was wrong, came up with, took the good parts of what he knew already, came up with new theories. He thinks that the pyramid was a power plant. Okay? That's what he thinks. Right? Let's jump into this. Actually, you know what? Jump into this first. I'm all over the place. We're going to jump into this first. This is AJ talking about the pyramids. Then we're going to go to Christopher Dunn's part, because that would be the perfect lead up. Listen to this.
The Giza Plateau, there is an aquifer under there. There's a lot of water under there. And that water would create this resonant frequency. And they found copper rods that go down there that would help bring up some of the electricity, or however it worked. And then in the pyramid, at the various chambers, there's residue of certain chemicals that, when combined, create a lot of hydrogen, like a violent reaction of hydrogen. So coming down from the Queen's chamber, and then I forget the other chamber, but they're built in a way so they come down. You use gravity and you just pour these chemicals down, creates this hydrogen reaction, which we know creates, there's residue of these chemicals there. This is not a conspiracy theory. The hydrogen expands, comes up through the gallery, which is this big hallway that goes up to the King's chamber. And they've discovered that in the Grand Gallery, there used to be these wooden posts or some kind of wooden, sort of flat wooden things. And those would create sound. It's called a Helmholtz resonator. Like when you blow across a bottle, it goes, whoo, that air is a Helmholtz resonator. So this hydrogen would come up through the chamber. These things would resonate with sound, the F-sharp chord specifically, and that would cause it to build up more and more and more. The hydrogen expands. This chamber is built out of rose granite, which is an unusual type of granite because it's densely made of quartz. And when you compress quartz, it creates electricity. It's called piezoelectricity. And if you have a lot of quartz, you can create a lot of electricity. There's been experiments done where if it's a mountain of quartz, it creates something like 10 million volts, like it creates a lot of power. So you've got you've got the hydrogen expanding, creating this electricity. It's ionizing the air, amplifying it more. You've got the sound coming through, amplifying it more. And then you've got this hole leading into the King's chamber that's 4.8 inches by 8.4 inches, which is the perfect size for a hydrogen atoms microwave to just fit through as a waveguide. Comes up into the King's chamber. And the King's chamber has these pillars, and on top of it, a bunch of stones that are stacked. Everything is really smooth, except the top is really rough. And forever, they thought that they called this the relieving stones, that these would relieve the pressure of the pyramids. But they're not connected to anything, so there's no pressure there. But what they found is that this creates music, creates this chord. And what the theory is it's rough on top because they would chip away at it and tune it until it was just about right. And that's why it's smooth on the bottom but rough on the top. And so you've got all this energy. So how do we get it out? Well, when the pyramids were new or, intact, the interior is made out of a certain type of limestone that electricity can move around in. The exterior is made out of a different kind of limestone called Tura limestone, which is quarried from far, far away and brought in.
Way down the Nile, right?
Way down, hundreds of miles away. Like you'll hear Zayawas talk about the limestone on the pyramid, but he never talks about the Tura limestone or the rose granite. So there's all these different, why not just build the whole thing out of the same rocks that are right here? Bring the Tura limestone to Giza is like bringing the 100-ton blocks up the coast of Florida. It's like that far. But it's a special type of limestone that's very low in magnesium. It's a great insulator. So you've got this electricity, and then you've got sort of this conductor, and then you've got another insulator. And that's called
incredible retention this guy has to know these things, these measurements, low in magnesium, incredible. This guy, wow.
Dielectric, and that creates even more power. And if you had a gold capstone on top, which is a great conductor, you can force that energy up through the capstone and up into the ionosphere. And that's what Nikola Tesla was trying to do. It's the same technology. Where I get stuck is, I love all of that, and I buy it. But we don't see any evidence of what they did with the power. So the people who are really into it will say, well, the obelisks at one time also had metal capstones, so they would be receivers. Okay, but still, what did they do with it?
What did they do with it? Now, see, this was done a while ago, this episode, before the whole Labyrinth thing came to light. So now when you say, what did they do with that power? The Labyrinth all of a sudden gives a different dimension to things. They were powering that. It wasn't like they were powering up. Maybe it was just slaves on the surface, skilled workers, whatever you want to call them, whatever you call them today in 2025. And maybe all the surface was that, and maybe the royalty were just in there. Or maybe it's way before pharaohs and all of that stuff. Maybe it's way before, and there's a different type of civilization there. Maybe I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's back when there was actually lush greenery everywhere and they just kept that for agriculture, and they went down into the earth because it's safer in there. I've been saying that for years. It's much safer to be inside something than outside something. Okay? When there's a storm, you don't get on your roof. You get inside the house, right? So there you go. Towards what he just said, what were they powering? Now we know that they could have been powering this labyrinth and making sure that everything was lit up there. Or even more so. I mean, you know, when it comes to this ancient society, we keep thinking maybe they just lit things up. Maybe they had everything that you could think of. Maybe they had communication devices that made it so they could communicate with whoever was in India while they're building their temple out of a mountain. Maybe they had that kind of communication. Maybe they actually had portals and stargates, because there seems to be a lot of evidence in ancient Egypt in regards to that. Maybe they were working with that type of stuff. Maybe the Atlanteans and these people who were there, because they weren't even Egyptians, they weren't even ancient Egyptians at this point. This goes further back. Maybe they were communicating with Atlanteans. Maybe they moved around. Maybe that's why the world was so connected. Maybe they weren't, they didn't care about TVs and TV shows. And that's not the rating when it comes to how advanced a society is. Maybe they were focused on other things, like we should be, but it seems like some demonic force is at play. So instead, you turn on your TV and you hear and it's Netflix, and there's some guy and he's like, "Hey, how you doing? I'm a lady." And you're like, "Oh, what is this? What show is this?" And it doesn't matter what show it is. There's always just some guy like, "Hey, I'm a lady." Every single show you go to. So dumb. Now, we move on to Christopher Dunn, because he was talking about how it all works. This is the man who actually brought this theory to the mainstream. He's the one that did all the research. He's the one that's had this theory. He's the OG of this type of thing. So let's jump into what he's talking about.
Yes.
Okay, so the Giza power plant described the Great Pyramid. I described it as a coupled oscillator, in that it was connected to the Earth. Its proportions were an integer to the Earth, and it was tuned harmonically to the vibrations of the Earth. That was what I proposed. And as such, it reacted to the Earth's pulse, or the Earth's hum vibrations, and through that they were able to stimulate electron flow in the central granite chamber, and produce microwave energy. So basically, I described it as a maser, but it was a
maser,
like a solid state maser,
a solid state electron harvester.
Well, that's what ultimately I called it. Yeah, it was a electron harvester. And so that was in my first book. I didn't call it electron harvester.
Oh, that was until the new book. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I realized that, a lot of people will look at the word power plant, and the vision that comes to their mind is like smokestacks,
Right.
Long trains of coal snaking through the countryside to these power plants. And so, kind of, and then of course, power plant, nuclear power plants, coal power plants,
Right.
and stuff like that.
Right.
So that it's generally associated with boiling water, creating steam, pushing turbines, and drawing the electrons off the generators. But this was kind of like a different concept in terms of creating energy, or drawing energy from the Earth directly, without burning fossil fuels or smashing atoms.
So underneath, in the cover of the Giza power plant, you have the pyramid sitting in the desert, and then underneath that you have like it looks like lava underneath, and then like the crust of the Earth. So I guess you're describing that seismic activity that's happening inside of the Earth, creating vibrations that are resonating with all the rocks in the pyramid?
Yeah, that cover was created by my publisher, Bear and Company. They're artists, and basically it does represent what you just said.
Okay.
I mean, as far as strict accuracy to engineering drawings, that you don't see that there, but it loosely gives you an idea.
Okay.
Right. It represents the pyramid, energy coming out of the pyramid, its connection to the earth, and energy going on inside the earth that is tapping into.
So you theorized that the pyramids were harvesting energy and generating energy to power whatever civilization created them.
Yeah.
And how do they get power from the pyramids?
How do they get it?
How do they use it?
Oh, how do they use it?
Yeah.
That is a good question. It's a question I get asked a lot. The problem that we have is when you look at the pyramids, so you go to Egypt and you walk around the pyramids and the temples, you look at the skeleton of a civilization. Obviously, there's so much that's missing, that has disappeared over time.
Right.
We don't know where. And so when you ask the question, well, what were they powering? We don't find any microwave ovens out in the desert. So, and you probably won't. The only thing that really survived from that period of time was
The rocks.
The rocks.
Yeah.
Right. So and some other materials, but the rocks basically survived. And
So now I would love to know what he thinks about this, because this, like he said, it's something that he gets asked a lot. And honestly, he's great. If you look into his work, it's fantastic, but he doesn't have much of an answer for that. Because like you said, well, it's just the rocks. I don't know. You're just on the surface. It's all you can see. I wonder, I hope he has enough time. He's getting much older now. I wonder what he's going to write about now that he knows about this labyrinth. What connection he'll be able to make, because he is the godfather of that theory. So, you have the pyramid here, you have the labyrinth down there. Now maybe he'll be able to actually make some connections. But again, we're still at a point where we don't know what's inside of it. To say that there's some metal Tic Tac-shaped, right away my mind goes towards spaceship, goes towards some kind of, the same Tic Tac-shaped things that people are still seeing to this day. But it could be something else. That could be where all that power would be going. Maybe the pyramid was generating, and then it would pull that down into that Tic Tac-shaped metallic thing, whatever it is, and that would act as a generator and then power everything. Maybe. I also like the fact that he brought up, when it comes to a power plant, we always think smokestacks. That's what you're thinking. You're thinking a power plant of today, and it just makes it not make that much sense. But think about a more advanced, not even more advanced, but a civilization that is going towards something different. Maybe it's because they're more in harmony with the world. Maybe that's what it is. They don't have the demonic forces that took over like we have now. Maybe they were just straight up people, just organic, straight up people, no junk DNA, no calcified pineal gland, none of that stuff. They were just open, clear antennas with the divine, Maybe that's what was going on. Maybe that's why they did something so different. I mean, we do live in a world where somebody's like, hey, I made a car that runs on water. And then the next day it's like, what happened to that guy? I don't know. He got hit by a bus. Yeah, it was weird. He wasn't in the street. The bus fell on him. Yeah, it was very weird. He was in a park. And a whole bus fell on him. Yeah, it was weird. It had Philadelphia plates. I like how that's a joke that only the dedicated listeners are going to understand. That's what I like. But let's move on. I don't know what Christopher Dunn's going to do with that work. So looks like Shane Gillis there. Someone tell me I'm wrong. Does that not look like Shane Gillis? Like he's about to tell me how gay I am for for caring so much about ancient Egypt. Oh my gosh. Anyway, let's jump into this. Dare I move my camera for this guy? I think I might. I usually only do it for Asmongold, but I'll do it for Shane Gillis today. Now, this is him going through the classic accounts, people talking about this. This is so baffling to me. If I knew about this before, I would have just been like, "Oh, it exists." If I read about somebody who is giving an account hundreds of years ago, like Plato, was it Plato? Graham Hancock found out someone's uncle, a great philosopher's uncle, was talking about a world of the past, this Atlantis. I was like, oh, that's it. Done. It's made up in my mind. It's real now. That's it. That's all I need. Like, what do you think? These guys are dumb? They're the smartest minds of that time. They're not dumb. And I think the same thing with this. Listen to these accounts.
I'm sure some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of you.
Of course, that's how I'm listening to it, guys. I'm telling you. That's what I do.
May not have heard of this, but I am, of course, talking about the Great Labyrinth of ancient Egypt. Now, when I say labyrinth, the word, I don't think the Great Lost Labyrinth of ancient Egypt is the one that comes to mind. If you're of my age, and I might be dating myself a little bit here when I talk about Labyrinth, the first thing you might think about is this movie, the David Bowie movie with all the Henson puppets with Jennifer Connelly. Fantastic movie from back in the day. It's one from the childhood that probably sticks in a lot of people's brains these days, back when they made pretty good movies and Hollywood was doing its thing. The ancient Egyptian labyrinth might still not be the one that you think about when you think of real labyrinth. In fact, most people, I suspect, when you say labyrinth, think that it probably originated from the ancient Greek labyrinth, the one on the island of Crete. Now, this is one of those ancient Greek myths or legends or stories that's part of their mythology. Most people probably have a passing understanding or awareness of this with the Minotaur. It was built for King Minos by a guy named Daedalus, who was the father of Icarus. Icarus being the guy who, flew a little too close to the sun and the wax on his wings melted and they fell to the death. I think Daedalus was supposed to be with him at the time. But yeah, so you also have Theseus, who went into the labyrinth. There's a whole story of him following and unraveling his cotton thread so he wouldn't get lost in the labyrinth. He was going down there to save the maiden because they were sacrificing maidens to this beast that lived in the labyrinth, the Minotaur, who was a half-bull, half-man creature, and the Minotaur was killed by Theseus. And this whole story, I mean, if it's kind of a funny one if you want to look into the origins of it, particularly the origins of the Minotaur, if you want to find out how sort of twisted some of the ancient Greek myths and stories and legends will get, you can look into where the Minotaur came from. I'll let everyone look that one up in their own time. It has to do with Poseidon and King Minos' wife and a big white bull, and yeah, you don't really want to know the rest of it. However, this whole story and this whole legend, even though the word labyrinth does come from the Greek, like labyrinthus, the etymology of the word does come to us from the Greeks. The whole idea of the labyrinth, it's said that this whole concept was inspired and built because the Greeks knew about the ancient Egyptian labyrinth. And we can go back to early Greek writers during the period to find out that this is the case. In fact, let's look at a guy called Diodorus Siculus, who was an ancient Greek historian, originated from Sicily in his Histories Volume 1 in around the 1st century BCE. And he wrote this about the Cretan labyrinth. He said, "It is even said by some that Daedalus crossed over to Egypt, and in wonder at the skill shown in the building, built for Minos, king of Crete, a labyrinth like that in Egypt, in which, so the tales go, the creature called the Minotaur was kept." He goes on to explain a little further that, be that as it may, the Cretan labyrinth has completely disappeared, either through the destruction wrought by some ruler or through the ravages of time. But the Egyptian labyrinth remains absolutely perfect in its entire construction down to my time. Now, Diodorus Siculus lived and obviously visited Egypt in the 1st century BC. So he's talking about the Cretan labyrinth at that point. Seems to have been destroyed. It was a figure from his own history, but he evidently visited the labyrinth, and he wrote more about it. One of the other things he talked about, that it was this complex and crazy undulating set of passages and chambers. He says that, quote, "For once in, it is impossible to find one's way out again without difficulty, unless one lights upon a guide who is perfectly acquainted with it." So Diodorus Siculus actually visited this ancient Egyptian labyrinth, and he certainly wasn't the only one. Probably the earliest historical figure that we know of who wrote about his account of visiting the labyrinth, and probably one of the most famous people to have ever visited the labyrinth, was, of course, Herodotus. Now, Herodotus lived several centuries before Diodorus Siculus. He lived around the 5th century BC, 484 to 430 BC, and he wrote extensively about the mysteries and wonders of Egypt, including the labyrinth. Now, what he wrote about the labyrinth is quite revealing in terms of its grandeur and its scale, quoting Herodotus. This I saw myself, and I found it greater than words can say. For if one should put together and reckon up all of the buildings and all of the great works produced by the Hellenes, they would prove to be inferior in labour and expense to this labyrinth, though it is true that both the temple at Ephesus and that at Samos are works worthy of note. So he's here explaining that the work of all of the Greeks, the Hellenes, the Hellenes, he's talking about the Greek civilization, his own civilization. Of course, Herodotus was a Greek historian as well. He wrote this particular passage in his book 2 of his histories. He's saying that all of the works of the Greeks and everything that's impressive and amazing about the ancient Greek civilization paled into comparison than simply just the labyrinth. The amount of labor it would take to do everything that the ancient Greek civilization did would be less than that required to build the labyrinth. He also compared the labyrinth to the other parts of Egypt, quoting Herodotus. The pyramids were also greater than words can say, and each one of them is equal to many works of the Hellenes, great as they may be, but the labyrinth surpasses even the pyramids. Now, this is an incredible claim, because if you're like me and you've ever been to the Giza Plateau, you've been to Egypt. I go all the time. I mean, I must have been 15 times now. I mean, just at least to the Giza Plateau, you go multiple times on a particular trip. But every time, this doesn't get old. I've stood in front of these incredible stone triangles in the desert, these amazing pieces of architecture, of ancient work, and you just marvel at their size and scale. It's really hard to comprehend until you're actually there and you see them in person. It's phenomenal, and it never gets old. So every time you go there and you see them, you're like, oh my God, they're so massive, they're so impressive. And then the more you learn about them, their attributes, the precision, everything that goes into them, that makes them incredibly impressive. And for somebody like Herodotus to say that this labyrinth exceeds the pyramids in grandeur, that is an astonishing claim. But that's not all we have to go on in the labyrinth either. We have a number of historical authors who actually got pretty specific about how it was built and what it was made up of. Let's continue with Herodotus and learn a little bit more about the structure of the labyrinth. This is what he wrote about that. It has 12 courts covered in, with gates facing one another, 6 upon the north side and 6 upon the south, joining on one to another, and the same wall surrounds them all outside. And there are in it 2 kinds of chambers, the one kind below the ground and the other kind above these, 3,000 in number, of each kind 1,500. Herodotus here is telling us a little bit about the structure of the labyrinth. He's talking about the fact that there are 12 great courts that have gates that face each other. So there's at least 12 large courtyards as part of this structure. There is one single wall surrounding the entire thing, and at least 2 levels that he knows of, with something like 1,500 rooms, I assume, that is in addition to these great courts that are in the labyrinth. Now, Herodotus was also being quite honest with us in the next passage that he says, in that he never visited the lower layers. He only heard about them. And what he wrote about them was, accordingly, we speak of the chambers below by what we received from hearsay, while those above we saw ourselves and found them to be works of more than human greatness. For the passages through the chambers and the goings this way and that through the courts, which were admirably adorned, afforded endless matter for marvel, as we went through from a court to the chambers beyond it, and from the chambers to colonnades, and from the colonnades to other rooms, and then from the chambers again to other courts." End quote. Herodotus didn't see, he was told about the lower layers, and he's talking about that there are chambers below the ground, but there, within that whole structure, there are massive courts, and he's here describing the winding passages and the labyrinthian nature of the labyrinth.
This is wild, because this right here, you can't like the people who are, the Egyptologists, they can't possibly not know about this guy. It's not like this dude is the only person who knows about this historian. So they had to have heard this. And for them to do the whole, because I don't know if you heard the Joe Rogan clip, they were talking about how some guy got to what he thought was the foundation of this labyrinth and said, look, it's all destroyed, For you to hear that depiction and then to go, how deep did they go? Because he said the water table is 5 meters. So let's just say you went 10 meters in, and then you went through the water table, you hit that little foundation there, what you thought was foundation. It's actually a ceiling. You hit that, and to say, oh, well, it's all gone, you have to be covering something up. There's no way you would think that. Again, I'm being very charitable because I don't think these people are dumb. I think they're very smart. I think they dedicate their lives to this whole thing, so they must know what historians have to say, and they must have heard this depiction of what, once you hear what this guy says, how could you ever think that it's destroyed based on what he says? I guess because so much time has gone by, that's how you can ration it. But I don't know, man. I'm wearing a tinfoil Speedo right now. Okay. I don't got on slacks like some regular guy right now.
Herodotus also gives us more clues about what the labyrinth was made of and his impressions of the stonework and the actual workmanship of what was going on inside the labyrinth. So continuing with Herodotus here, quote, over the whole of these is a roof made of stone like the walls, and the walls are covered with figures carved upon them, each court being surrounded with pillars of white stone, fitted together most perfectly. And at the end of the labyrinth, by the corner of it, there is a pyramid of 40 fathoms, upon which large figures are carved. And to this there is a way made underground. So these are really important aspects of the labyrinth that Herodotus is describing. Things we should keep in mind as we go forward. He's talking about white columns that are fitted together most perfectly, the fact that the roof is made of stone, the same stone as the walls, and at the end of the labyrinth, or attached to it somehow, probably via an underground passage, there's a pyramid. And at that time, the pyramid sounds like it was cased, and it actually had inscriptions on the outside of the casing with these large figures. Now, Herodotus isn't the only one who's talked about these different aspects of the pyramid and these different, I guess, characteristics of it. So let's return to Diodorus Siculus, who wrote a little bit more about the specifics of what's in the labyrinth, quoting Diodorus Siculus. While in respect of carving and other works of craftsmanship, they left no room for their successors to surpass them. For when one had entered the sacred enclosure, one found a temple surrounded by columns, 40 to each side, and this building had a roof made of a single stone, carved with panels and richly adorned with excellent paintings. First of all, Diodorus here is saying that literally it's perfection. Like, he's saying that there was no room left to succeed the craftsmanship of how this thing was built. He's all
The Vatican took it. That's it. Vatican has it. They have it. They just have it. They just have it in their stuff, They got like Jesus's, they got Jesus. Anything that Jesus touched, staffs, rocks, seats he sat on, they have all of it. They have everything. Ancient Africa, they got all the jewels. They have these paintings. If there's paintings, you better believe the Vatican and the Smithsonian fought over it, and the Vatican probably wins 9 times out of 10,
also describing the fact that in these columned halls, so remember, Herodotus talked about 12 of them. He's talking about entering one of these temples, one of these columned halls that was surrounded by these columns that, Herodotus describes as these white stone columns, but there were 40 of them to each side, and that this entire building had a roof made of a single stone. Now, I actually am quite skeptical about this claim that it was a single stone. However, I think what he's describing is something that we can see on other ancient megalithic sites, places like the Valley Temple in Giza, the Sphinx Temple, probably the best, the Assyrian. But the Valley Temple in Giza, when you visit this today, you're looking at these massive granite walls. There was a granite roof on this thing. And remember that when this thing was finished and these walls were polished, you probably couldn't see the joins in the stone. There are only a few spots in the Valley Temple where you can see the original facing the original surface of the stone, how finely wrought and polished it was. The surface has since spalled off, like the actual outer surface of the granite. This has happened over thousands, maybe many thousands of years of erosion. And what happens when the surface spalls off on these blocks, it spalls off a little more on those, the joins between the blocks, because you have that corner there, so that a bit more of the corner comes off. And
Or it's actually one rock. Like that could just be a thing that they used to have down packed. They just knew how to do it. This one's wild. That's just one piece. That's just one piece. It's possible that that's exactly what was going on. It is possible. Now, let me see if there's any more account. Oh, there is another account. Let's see this last account here before I end it off. I don't want to run too long here.
Building quite equal to the pyramids. So maybe he's not being Christ is at Luxor in Upper Egypt. There might be 40 columns in this picture or in this courtyard, something like that. I've never actually taken the time to count them. But remember, Diodorus actually said there were 40 to each side. So each hall had at least 80 columns, and there were something like 12 of them. And 12 on its own is quite an interesting number from a processional perspective. This gives you an idea of the kind of scale we might be talking about in this building, when one of these halls contains twice as many columns as the hall that we're seeing here at Luxor. So again, let's look at some more of these ancient accounts and look at some of these other clues that are left to us from these other authors. Let's talk about Strabo. Now, Strabo was an ancient Greek geographer who lived essentially across year zero. He was around the same time as Jesus Christ was said to exist, from 64 BC to around year 19 of the Common Era. He's best known for his work Geographica, and he talked about visiting the Labyrinth as well in his work, and this is what he wrote about it. Quote, "In addition to these things, there is the edifice of the Labyrinth, which is a building quite equal to the pyramids." So maybe he's not being quite as generous as Herodotus in saying that it exceeds the pyramids, but he's saying it's quite equal to the pyramids, which is still, that's a hell of a claim. "It is a great palace made up of many palaces, for such is the number of peristyle courts which lie contiguous within one another." So he's, again, reinforcing that there are many palaces, or many of these courtyards, with all of these peristyle halls and courts that have all of these columns in them. Again, we're seeing more eyewitness accounts of the same thing. "Before the entrances, there lie what might be called hidden chambers, which are long and many in number, and have paths running through one another which twist and turn, so that no one can enter or leave without a guide." So again, this is the labyrinthian nature of the structure, right? He's talking about that there are passages that, and Herodotus talked about this too, you go from this way to that, from this room to that, through different passages, that you need a guide to get in here, that you can actually get lost and presumably, get into some trouble. And this just reminds me of the chicanas in South America, the labyrinths that exist under the ground that are said to exist on many of these sites. And there's actually been stories of people getting into them and actually getting lost and dying, like a few school kids did at one point. I think some young people got in there, and it's one of the reasons that they've been barring up entrances in places like Cusco to the underground passages. They're news at the moment. They're starting to rediscover some of those things. At least they're trying to get into them again. They're scanning.
Man, very, very interesting stuff. So for me, there's definitely a labyrinth. I'm not gonna sit around and be like, oh, well, the technology. You have the technology, and they're seeing that there's something there. And then you're having many people throughout history talk about there being something there. I'm good. That's it. That's all I need, Call me old-fashioned, okay? But when you have 2025 technology correlating with what was happening back in year one, I'm confident. I don't know about you guys, but you got to wonder, what was all this? And you know what I wonder every time I see stuff like this? Are they still doing it? Like, around Denver Airport, it's said that there are these bases inside of mountains, but they go really deep. And it's said that someone who was in the construction crew came forward and said that there are underground cities, bases, whatever you want to call it, but it's like a city. And they said that it's big enough, and it's way, way underground, and it's big enough that there could be 2 tractor trailers going one way and 2 tractor trailers going the other way. That's how big it is in terms of like the roads. And then when it's actually the structures that people are inside of where these trucks would be going, it's just untold how big it is. So it's like, did they ever stop doing stuff like this? And maybe that's why they don't want us to know. Because then everybody might be like, hey, you know, I want a bunker like Zuckerberg. Like, imagine his bunker. You think it just stops? You think his bunker is like a basement? It's like a big basement? Or do you think it goes really low? You know? And then that construction crew who digs it, they disappear. You know, like, you're out of here. And then all of a sudden they go, we need another construction crew, and they go even lower. And then those guys disappear right away. Maybe it's like that. Maybe this hasn't stopped. But anyway, it's like midnight. My mind's going to places right now. But anyways, guys, I just wanted to bring all that to you. Please look into it. It's really, really cool. There's going to be some updates in the near future, I believe. I'm out of here.